As we know, the kids in this case ran away from a group home, now putting the foster care system back in the spotlight tonight. We're joined now by Lindsay Collins-Wilson, CEO of First Star in Los Angeles. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. Obviously, the media picked up on this story because the footage is dramatic and the story itself is dramatic. But when I first saw last night, I immediately thought of the kids involved and how troubled they must be, one, to have been in that home in the first place, and two, to have done what they're caught on that video doing. For folks who don't know, explain what kinds of children are in this kind of facility in our country.
Absolutely. What we observed, of course, is nothing less than tragic. Our young people that live in group homes are there by no fault of their own. They were placed in the child welfare system as a result of abuse. That can be physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, generally driven by poverty, and medical issues that their parents may have to undergo. And as a result, their family unit was dismantled. They experienced trauma, generally trauma year after year, before they're placed in the child welfare system. When they're placed in the child welfare system, the system is expected to be their parents, their mother and their father. But the system is not a person. It is a building. It is a technical environment in which it's a linear process. They are required to provide a placement for that young person, and they are required to ensure the sustainability of that young person, but not the ability for them to thrive. When young people are placed in group homes, this is a restrictive environment. This is an environment in which you place your young people that have your emotional issues, your behavioral issues, but instead of the group home doing what it's intended to do, and that is to restore that young person, provide counseling, etc., what the group home does is it is a punitive environment. It is a prison-like environment where you have 6 or more young people that are dealing with the desperate desire to return back to their homes, knowing that their parents cannot care for them. And in that environment, unfortunately, the goals that we want our young people to focus on, scholarly achievements, going to school, considering their future, those things do not happen. And so what we've seen play out here in Florida are 2 young people that were in a very desperate situation. And unfortunately, because of their family unit dismantling and them being forced into the child welfare system as a result of that, they have carried out, very sort of, these negative actions. But a lot of it is placed on the realities of what brought them into the child welfare system.
And so in other words, this story is not the failure of a single group home. In many ways, it is a failure of society and of families that happens all over the world in our country. With that understood, and I think there's some compassion necessary beyond what the sheriff said in that soundbite, because it's a little short-sighted. But 300 calls to that facility last year. A young person there killed a guard in March. Now we have this incident. So when the ideal is not working, when things have gotten tough, at the end of the day, the people who live in that neighborhood should be safe. The staff who are compassionate enough to work in a place like that should be safe. What can be done in the interim while we get to that better place of this being a more holistic facility?
Right. No, absolutely. When we look at the national statistics that are related to foster youth, less than 50% graduate from high school, less than 10% go on to college, and less than 3% earn a degree. So there's absolutely work that has to happen on the foundational level to improve the outcomes of these young people. Specific to the group home, the foundational work that has to be involved has to include the empathetic work. And this is, you mentioned the officer who was mentioning and talking about the case. He didn't really share much empathy in his comments about these particular young people. That has to be addressed. We have to have folks and professionals in that space that can truly handle the emotional reeling that young people have to deal with and really suffer through when they're not with their mothers and when they're not with their fathers or their grandmothers or their grandfathers. When we think about programs like First Star, one of the reasons why we know that the program is successful school is that over the course of 4 years, we provide mentorship and consistent adult support that is focused on their aspirations, focused on that young person graduating from high school, thinking about their next steps of college, vocational, certificate. What we find in the group home setting is very frequently the staff members are not focused on that young person's future. And if they are, that young person is getting several stories from several people in terms of what they feel is the best route for them. And so it's a system, honestly, that needs to really sort of be dismantled and sort of starting from the ground up. How can we best support our young people that have unfortunately experienced the most tragedy in our society? And that is being abandoned by their parent.
Lindsay, thank you for a very compassionate and grounded and realistic answer to that question. Certainly a far bigger story than a shootout. Thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.